Republican ideological leaders like Paul Ryan and Rand Paul have been making headlines recently for making racially charged statements during media appearances and stump speeches. But the problem goes well beyond the racist foundations of the Republican Party, and it's actually part of their strategy to destroy social safety net programs designed to keep people out of poverty. Joining me now to talk about this is Howard Nations. So Howard, Republicans today are talking as if they were living back in the 1950s, 1960s, or possibly even the 1940s. This racist tone that they're taking, all over the country, this isn't anything new, is it? I mean, we've seen this for decades now, haven't we?
Well, the Republican Party has a very firm racist foundation, starting particularly in 1964 with the Civil Rights Act and in 1965 with the Voting Rights Act. When President Johnson said when he signed it, "I fear that we have lost the South to the Republican Party for the next generation," he was a couple of generations off, because what happened was when he signed those two bills, there was a mass exodus in the South from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party because of the rights granted to minorities. The solid South, and it was as solid Democratic as you could be, became solid Republican. When I was raised in the South, there was a term about yellow dog Democrats, and the phrase was you could elect your yellow dog to the governor's seat if you ran him as a Democrat. Well, that changed in 1964 with the signing of the Civil Rights Act. So based primarily on race issues, the South shifted from Democrat to Republican.
And then they learned how to harness that resentment for the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, and that has been their strategy ever since. I know Lee Atwater, obviously one of the most famous people, but he really took it and ran with it and perfected it, didn't he?
He certainly did. There's a famous interview with Lee Atwater in 1982 when he was talking to a political scientist when he was explaining that, and I'm going to change he used the N-word. I'm going to change it to black. He said, you start out in 1954 by saying black, black, black. By 1968, I can't say black. That backfires. It hurts you. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you talk about cutting taxes. These are totally economic issues, but the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. So it was a very strong strategy that was racially based.
And so then it evolved from there. We got into Ronald Reagan, with his image of the welfare queen, and then even with George H.W. Bush with the whole Willie Horton attack. So, this concept of GOP racism, I know a lot of members of the Republican Party want to jump out and say, we are not racist, that you're making this up. But no, go back and look at the history that you've just described. This is all real. This is all verifiable. And this is what this party was founded on. And so here we are today, 45 years past. Has anything at all changed from those Lee Atwater and Ronald Reagan welfare queen images today?
That's an extremely good question, and there are two answers to it. And to get to one of the answers, let's look a little closer at Ronald Reagan, the hero of the Republican Party. Remember that Ronald Reagan opened his presidential campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, the site of the murder of civil rights activists Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner. Just think about that. Then he campaigned, as you said, against the welfare queens. Reagan was famous for being quoted on the statement that he made to several audiences when he was campaigning in the South, talking about that it was frustrating to stand in line behind strapping young bucks buying T-bones with food stamps. This is still the president that's most admired today by today's Republicans. And remember that Atwater, who was the founder of the Southern Strategy, joined Roger Ailes as creator, who's the creator of the Fox echo chamber, in that whole Willie Horton strategy that was very instrumental, total racism, very instrumental in getting George H.W. Bush elected president. Roger Ailes is still at it. Just tune into Fox News any day. So has it changed today? There's a theory, the theory that it has is that today the racist underpinnings of the Republican Party are not really the goal. It's not racism, that the goal is to attack the safety net. The goal is to attack the food stamps and the recipients of food stamps, and that the racism today is a byproduct. I don't agree with that. I agree that that may be one goal, but the second goal of stirring up racism for the sheer sake of racism, for attacking minorities, is still alive and well, certainly in the South.
Right. And so you do have these folks. I know Paul Ryan is Wisconsin, but he recently came under fire when he said, we have these lazy inner city people who are dragging the economy down. They don't want to work. They just want to live off the government forever and ever. And that is one of the things that really sparked this whole renewal of the Republican racism. But if you look past that, it's certainly not the first instance, and it's not going to be the last. We have business leaders. We have Republican candidates who've said that I think KKK-owned businesses should be allowed to ban blacks. We have other Republicans out there who are saying, these lazy welfare recipients are no good. We have people like George Zimmerman out there at gun shows signing autographs. This, racism is at the heart of all this. And I agree with you completely. I think that you have the racism factor, and then also separately, you do have the attacks on social safety nets, which we're seeing coming from the Republicans on a daily basis. But they're trying to merge the two, and it's not working, is it?
No, look what's happening to your voter ID requirements today. They cut back on early voting, especially on Sundays, on the Sunday before elections. What is the purpose of that? Black churches had the Souls to the Polls campaigns, where they would take people directly from the churches to the polls because they could vote on Sunday. They eliminated that in several states. How is that not racism? In Arizona and Kansas, ID and proof of citizenship was recently upheld by a federal judge as a requisite for voting. Now, that's disproportionately affects minorities, but it also is a direct attack on minorities themselves as minorities. So,
well, you get into this voter ID issue, and I wanted to tackle one of the prevailing myths that Republicans have is, if you're a citizen, you have an ID, because obviously you can't get on an airplane if you don't have an ID. You can't drive a car if you don't have a photo ID. But what they don't understand is a lot of these people, obviously, if they don't have enough money for an ID, they're not flying around the country. They're not going on vacation. Most of them do not have cars. They live in an area where they can either walk where they need to go or they hop on public transportation. And so, yes, those voter ID laws do disproportionately affect minority, low-income voters all over the country. And we're seeing it especially bad down here in the South. I know we're in a horrible red part of Florida. You're in Texas. We see this firsthand, and you do see writers, you see phenomenal writers who say that, look, it's not really about racism. They're really just attacking the social safety net. And in some instances, in some places, that may be true. But I know what you see in your hometown, what we see in our hometown, is purely race-driven.
Yeah, let's look at Texas. They just passed a voter ID in the last legislative session, which is totally Republican-dominated, which said that a gun license is a valid ID, but a student ID from Texas University isn't. They're attacking two things there. One is that they are trying to eliminate as much of the minority voting as possible because those people don't have IDs. But secondly, they're attacking the students. And they're attacking the students because the millennials are voting heavily Democratic. And they were one of the major reasons for Obama's victory. And they're one of the major reasons why, if there is to be a resurgence in Texas of the Democratic Party, the millennials will play a very important part of that. So they also invoked a rule saying that if you live on campus at the University of Texas and you've been there 4 years, you're a senior, you're not really you can't vote in that county. You have to go back to your home district. Are kids going to take a day off from school to drive back to their home district or fly home to vote? No. So it's all attacks on not just minorities, it's attacks on students. That part of it is the pro-Republican part. That's the part about building the very strong Republican Party, Republican supremacy. But the other part, the racial gerrymandering, redistricting blacks into the fewest number of districts they can get, is very much a part of making sure that they have the fewest members of minorities elected to either Congress or state legislatures or anything that requires a strong voter turnout.
Well, and so real quick here, do you see this problem of the Republican racism, do you see it going away with the new generation coming up? I mean, are we going to see in 15, 20 years from now this whole racism issue kind of dying down within the party, or do you think that it's just going to hold over and continue to be an issue?
Well, the millennials identify themselves very much as more so with the Democratic Party than with the Republican Party. Racism is dying off with the new generation. However, as many of the Southern strong white racist voters are elderly, and so will there be a change because the elderly white Southern racists who were raised from cradle to grave with racism, are dying off and being replaced by millennials? Will it probably happen? Yes. Will it take decades to come? Yes.
Howard, thank you very much for your insight on this topic. We certainly appreciate it.